Chris Wilkins is the former Director of Strategy for the British Prime Minister, Theresa May. He joins us now from Surrey in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for your time. So this report by the British Foreign Affairs Committee highlights humanitarian concerns and calls for UK policy shifts, which echo long-standing demands from UK civil society. Do you see this as a rare moment where the political establishment and the public conscience are now converging on the issue of Palestinian rights?
I think there's some convergence, but I'm not sure it's happening quickly enough. I think public opinion is probably vastly ahead of political opinion at the moment. People see what's going on in Gaza, and obviously, it's intolerable, and British public opinion understands that. What the report, I think, highlights, amongst many things, though, is in a sense how powerless British politics is in this situation. It says that Israel isn't listening. And of course, that is true, because ultimately there are lots of things that the British government could do symbolically. And a lot of the conversation is around those symbolic things that it could do. But I think if I were Keir Starmer talking to you, I'd be saying, well, that's fine and it signals intent, but actually, will it have an impact? Will it have an effect? And that is the problem that I think the government feels it has, is that all of the things it can do that would satisfy public opinion, that would satisfy political opinion in many ways, simply won't have an impact on what's going on the ground. And they're really focused on what will be the most effective thing, not will be the most superficially attractive.
Well, given the controversy over UK F-35 component sales to Israel and potential violations of international humanitarian law, this is something the UK could do. Isn't it time the UK prioritised its human rights obligations over its defence partnerships?
So again, and there's a lot of pressure on the government to act in that regard, and I would expect to see in the coming weeks probably some progress and some change of policy on those issues. But again, I think if I were the Prime Minister, indeed if I were advising the Prime Minister, I'd say actually that is really going to have a limited impact on what is actually going on the ground, because the key dynamic behind all of this is, of course, the relationship between Israel and the United States. And what the British government feels its ultimate leverage is its relationship with Donald Trump and with the Trump administration, and any pressure it can bring to bear there. And making symbolic actions such as banning sales of parts like that, etc., actually mitigates against its relationship with the US administration sometimes. So it is a fine line they're trying to walk, because Keir Starmer and ultimately one of the key players in this, National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell, are trying to be impactful. They see their relationship with Donald Trump as the key way to actually drive some sort of impact. And a lot of the things that people are calling for, such as the things you just mentioned, would actually get in the way of the relationship with the US administration. So that is what they're sort of focused on. Now, you could say actually even that is a sort of slightly futile effort, because who knows if Donald Trump will listen. But that is really the strategy that the government is pursuing at the moment, rather than these symbolic actions of the type that you've just talked about.
But given the scale of devastation we've seen in Gaza, which has, of course, prompted widespread calls also to reassess the UK's long-standing support of Israel, dating back to the Balfour Declaration, do you think that could lead, this moment could lead to a potential turning point when it comes to UK foreign policy?
I do think that feels inevitable. And sitting here in the UK this morning, it certainly feels that the momentum now for that shift is inevitable. You've seen President Macron's comments yesterday about recognising a Palestinian state. The Labour government had in its manifesto for the general election last year a commitment to recognise a Palestinian state. And really, it's a question of timing. The Prime Minister has now put out a statement yesterday evening, which was probably the strongest yet in terms of talking about the inalienable right that the Palestinians have to a state. And what they're talking about is rather when they recognise it and how they recognise it, rather than if. And when that time comes, that will be a significant shift in UK policy. There's no doubt about that. The pressure is on to do that sooner rather than later. I think the Prime Minister would like to get probably to Labour Party conference after the summer. But with the pressure building at the moment, it's difficult to think he will get there without making a stronger commitment.
So this move by President Macron then to announce that France will officially recognise a Palestinian state in September is going to push the United Kingdom, you believe, to do the same?
I think it adds to the pressure, but actually the ultimate pressure is, firstly, the Labour government has committed to it, as I say in their manifesto, so it's a question of when. But really, the political and domestic pressure here now is mounting every day. There is a letter being circulated, signed by many, many Labour MPs and increasingly MPs from other parties as well, calling on the government to do it. With every passing day, there is added pressure on the Prime Minister. And really, the last few holdouts at the top of government are saying, OK, but it's a question of timing. When will this be a most effective intervention in the conflict? And so the fact of it happening feels inevitable. The question is merely when.
Okay.
And I think maybe the timing President Macron has set out, September, feels about right.
OK. Now, the UK's historical role from the Mandate era to today is often viewed by Palestinians as a betrayal. In light of the report's recommendations, what concrete steps do you think Britain could take now would restore trust and accountability?
I think that's really difficult. As you say, there's a history here which it's difficult for the UK to overcome. There are some actions that are called on, the first being what we've just talked about, the recognition of a Palestinian state in good time, further actions such as further sanctions around senior Israeli politicians who've been involved in some of the decision-making. There's a lot of pressure for things like that for the government to do as well. But ultimately, I think the dynamic here has always been that the British government feels that it has a unique position in terms of the relationship that it has with the US and with successive US administrations. And that's why this government is focused on using that leverage and that relationship to try and get the US to change policy. And now that might be a high bar to meet, but that's what they're trying to do. And they think if they can get any shift from the Trump White House, that is the kind of really significant action that will have an impact on the ground that might go some way to rebuilding trust with the people on the ground.
Chris, really good to get your perspective. Chris Wilkins, former Director of Strategy for the British Prime Minister Theresa May.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.